There it is.
There we go.
Hey.
Nothing like a little circle of death before you enter your broadcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm going to be posting. We are live here, and I'm recording all of this on my private message to you, Chris.
Okay.
Notice that iPhones do that now.
Oh, okay.
So I'm recording everything. Welcome to our second episode. Today we are going to be talking about shadows and light and that little line in between and how it shows up in our head, in our emotions, in our life, in our manifestations. I think it's going to be a pretty cool topic. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing amazing. Thanks for asking. And you're doing
good. I'm here. That's good.
Yeah. Glad we made it.
Absolutely. So, I think we had an interesting conversation. I'm letting everybody know we're live. I think we had an interesting conversation when we were coming up with this topic, actually. I think for those of you on the live and on the rebroadcast, I think, I want to give you a little insight into, we listen to podcasts and we're like, oh my gosh, like, that's an obvious topic, or I can see why they chose that, or I don't know why they chose this one. But at least for me, the conversations we have that go into the things that we talk about, is so interesting. They're all interconnected. And I think they're really inspiring. And when we're sitting there behind the scenes talking about these things and being passionate about what we need to be sharing, and then out pops a topic like this, and we have an hour to really make something meaningful of it.
Right. I know there's times that, it's like, I wish I could just walk around with a recorder, because those profound, those little things, they just, the nuggets, they just fall out, and then you're like, oh, gotta capture that. And I think that's, that's part of presence, right? That's part of the light, and that's, ongoing. If we're going to define, the shadow and the light, I guess would be one way to look at it. And for me, the shadow is the unknown, or the illusion of how we perceive the past, or or projecting a possible future.
Right.
And the light is, our presence in the now of how we're moving, how we're being,
right,
through that time of now, because it's always now.
That's right. Oh, well said. Yes, how our presence, how our light is working within that framework of time, which is really just in our head.
Right.
Really good point. I think, we throughout history, we've compared light to goodness and shadow to dark. But I think it's important to really return back to the awareness of that oneness, of light and shadow being the same, two sides of the same thing, because I think as you and I were, I don't know if it was on my broadcast yesterday or if it was when you and I were talking about this, but when we, I remember my dad saying to me years ago, we were talking about this. We were talking about light and darkness. And he's been a transcendental meditator for over 60 years. Wow. And just, humble as can be, but wow. And I remember him saying to me, if you've got a dark space or a dark room and you walk in and you turn on the light, no matter how dark it was, no matter how much darkness there is now light.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've got a room and you've got a light on, or you've got a candle in that dark room, as long as that light is burning, you still have light, no matter what the darkness. And I think that's a really interesting way of defining shadow and light. The other thing is something to consider. What do you need in order to have shadow?
Well, you have to have light.
You have to have light.
Yeah.
So It really is. It really is a beautiful balance. If we didn't have, this is the whole point of us being in a world of contrast.
Right.
If we didn't have flavors that we didn't like, we wouldn't be able to say, oh, that one's my favorite. I love that.
Right.
But in order to experience the flavors we love, we have to also have the taste buds and the neurological connections to say, I like this one. I don't like that one.
Right.
And that's something we don't have in non-physical.
Well, plus the faith to try it, right? To try the different variations of it. Because if you just, this is my favorite one, I don't get any other kind because this is my favorite. I've never had anything other than this kind. It's awesome. Well, you can't really say that in all truthfulness because we don't know, right? There could be one that we like a little bit more, and I think that leads to growth.
Curiosity. Yeah. Instead of if you can replace judgment with curiosity. And the cool thing is that in an ultimate reality that is perfect, that means, the ultimate existence. If you don't experience that contrast, everything is just always perfect.
Right.
So, I mean, this is really so important there. Now I'm centered kind of. So that's, just very, very important, I think, to keep in mind. And we would love your guys' questions and comments. So keep in mind that if you guys get on here, and I know this is only our second broadcast, but when we start building up a bigger audience and you guys get on here and you're asking questions and making comments, make sure that you check. I don't think we have our banner on here. I need to turn the banner on. Make sure that, there we go. Make sure that you guys check the banner and our posts on social media, because it does give you guys instructions if you want to ask us questions or talk to us, or maybe you're watching on the on a replay and you posted a question. We'd love to take that and discuss it in topics, or we can always do it on the next show. But I think it's really important that, if you want us to know who you are, then subscribe to the YouTube channel here. Or if you're watching on Facebook, we put the link in there, go to streamyard.com/Facebook, and then we can see who you are. But if you do pop on here and comment and we don't see you or know who you are, we're not ignoring you. We just can't see who you are, which is real typical. StreamYard's amazing, but that's something that you guys have to do if you want to be seen by us on StreamYard. I think one thing, Chris, everyone's going to be that I think you deal with people more with this than I do, because I tend to turn this into using different terminology. And, I don't really like the term shadow work. And the reason I don't like it is because for me, anything that becomes commercialized, I am like, well, I get repulsed by, and I tend to I translate it into what it is in other terms for people. Because I feel like it's marketed and everybody's talking about it, and it becomes one of those terms like the term God, which I used to love the term God, right. But people throw it around and it sort of loses its heartfelt feeling. But I think that a lot of your clients and people that you've worked with, probably more so than mine, have used that term. And, what are your thoughts on that, and how does that fit into our topic?
It's funny, you mentioned the whole God thing, the term, and we'll use this as an analogy for the shadow. My grandma once asked me if I believed in God because, I talked about energy and consciousness and, all those things. And I tried to stay away from the religion because, everybody has their thing. They're either for it or against it. And it's a teaching. And so she asked me, do you believe in God? And I said, yeah, and I can prove that it exists. And her eyes got huge, like, how? And I walked over and I flipped on the light switch. And I said, the bringer of light, I forgot the word, but bring light into from the dark, bring it into the light. And when I think of, because I've been called shadow worker, many a different times. And you know the way I define it, or the way I look at it, is it's bringing the unconscious into the conscious. It's bringing the unknown, or the things that we don't want to admit to ourselves, or we don't want to think about ourselves as, and realizing that there is an aspect of ourselves in that. If we want to go around saying that we're happy all the time, or we're good all the time, and we're never wanting to look at, well, what's keeping us from evolving beyond that label, or that vibrational feeling, it's because of our identity. And if we only see ourselves in one way, then it's going to be really hard to move beyond that. I remember when I got into the very beginning, I was studying, and there was an example brought up of, can you feel compassion for murderers? Could you see yourself doing that? And if you could see yourself doing that, well, then you don't have to go kill someone to acknowledge the fact that you would be capable of that. But right. That's within you. You're capable of doing such things. However, we don't have to go do it to prove that it's within us. So when I think of shadow, I think of the things that scare us, that creates fear. And when we're willing to experience that to a degree, then we understand how capable we actually are.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Woo. How many people want freedom from their 9 to 5, or freedom from what an addiction, or a freedom of something that ails them, but they're afraid to go beyond their comfort.
Yeah, and then we're talking about our comfort zones, right? Then that takes us back to, I think it's important for people to see how this all comes full circle. We've got mindset, we've got energy and consciousness, and it all really comes full circle.
Right.
So when we're talking about mindset, when we're talking about alignment, we've really got to get that mental, emotional, physical, and energetic side together. And we are, our society, a lot of ancient cultures were inclusive of all those things. They were aware those things are important. The Native Americans, a lot of the ancient Eastern cultures, they were aware, and they set life up so that all of those aspects of ourselves were included.
Right.
And I think one of the things people struggle with today, and they don't even know what's causing them struggle, is that's really left out. We're focused so much on the physical and so much on the mental.
Right.
And we analyze the emotional instead of working through it. And then we completely leave the energetic side out. And guess what? Everything's energy.
Well, I mean, emotion is just energy, right? But we define it with our mind and say, I like this feeling, I don't like this feeling, or, I feel anxious. Well, that another word for that could be, enthusiastic. It's a similar vibration. It's just how we relate to the consciousness of how we choose to process it, or how we choose to move through it. I know when we were talking about the title of the show, what was going through my mind at the time is, everybody wants to seek pleasure and avoid pain. But the more we do that, the more we're going to experience pain, because we can't avoid life.
What you resist persists. I think that's a great way to remember that. Yeah.
So, if we're always seeking external validation or external circumstances, or even the internal, before we realize that we have control over our happiness or our emotions inside, by the way we hold them as meaningful, right? Because you can be sad one moment and then choose to be happy, and put yourself in a happy state by, thinking of a happy memory, putting on some good music. I mean, there's different ways to shift your energy, to put you in those states. So I feel like when we're walking the line, it's again about presence and where are we at? What are we experiencing? And I remember Eckhart Tolle talking about this. Like once you realize that you're in a place where you don't want to be, well, you can shift that. And there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of methods, and there's a lot of teachings, that will help us do such things. What do you think about that?
I think you're spot on. I think that there are so many different, we've got to keep in mind, and this is one of the things I hope we can do for our audience, is really broaden their reality. Where are we, where's our viewpoint on all this? Where are we coming from? Because so many things that are discussed nowadays are really in one particular paradigm. It's coming from, either a left brain discussion where it's very cognitive, or it's coming from an emotionally venting situation where it's more of a very right-brained emotional discussion. But what about conscious conversation, which is what we're having here? What about embracing these different aspects of ourselves? What about going back to ancient cultures that worked, where people might say, oh, but they weren't as evolved as us? Well, in a lot of ways, they were more evolved.
Sure.
Because they were, those cultures that lived closer to nature, they were embracing whole aspects of themselves. They were accepting of life. They knew the power of surrender.
Right.
And unfortunately, we do not have a clear line between what is thought and what is consciousness. I mean, for God's sake, we have people trying to put, consciousness in AI. That's not going to happen. Being consciously awake as you are as a human being is one thing. That's the term we use for consciousness. But what about the eternal consciousness that you are? What about remembering? I tell people when I do live readings online all the time, don't forget, your existence didn't start here in this world, and then you're looking and hoping it's going to exist after you die. There's no death. But what about before this life? If we're going to look at linear time, you have existed for eternity. Don't believe me? Let's break it down. I mean, I love quantum physics because that is the closest thing we have to connecting non-physical and physical. Mm-hmm. And, intuitively, I have always believed that our mind is the link between the two. The mind is the thing that has the ability to, like I do in a reading, or when you do get intuition, translate what's coming in from source. Or if you're atheist and you don't want to talk about any of that, fine. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim or Christian or atheist. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Guys, because, and this is why I use quantum physics to bring everyone kind of inclusively together. It's all energy.
Mm-hmm.
So right now I'm working with my clients on knowing versus believing. Belief is just repeated thoughts. So when you have people that are taking their religion and they're like, it's this way, I know it's this way. Okay, well, that's fine. It's hard to admit it's a belief.
Right.
But there are things that are not beliefs. I mean, you and I were talking about this yesterday when we were coming up with the topic. I have to breathe air. There's not a belief about that. I mean, I can believe otherwise. I can believe anything I want. But the fact of the matter is that if in this body I don't breathe, I die. That's a fact. And I know that, right? And then there's things that you just have to know intrinsically. So some people might just know, like I know, if I go on a roller coaster again, I'll probably have a heart attack. I mean, really, there's just things you know about yourself that maybe, or you know about something, and it's your intuition, and you are that channel that awareness is going through. So I think as we talk about shadow and light, and we have to look within as well as without.
Mm-hmm.
You have to really be vigilant, and it's easy once you've done it for a while, but can you distinguish between your beliefs and your true inner knowing?
Right.
You know, I mean, I know people that say they're atheist and agnostic, and I don't believe in anything. Okay, well, they do believe in something. They believe in whatever goes into their atheist or agnostic beliefs. That
Right.
is a belief. Sorry, guys. Everyone wants to know, every human being, because we have a prefrontal cortex, wants to know, where do we come from? Where do we go? Why? Because it's survival instinct.
Mm-hmm.
You will believe whatever serves your ego best, unless you choose otherwise. So some of the most spiritual people I know are atheists, or they're scientists and they're agnostic. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But they're also seeking to understand, where did I come from?
Right.
And where am I going? And whereas science has fact and religion really doesn't, you're still choosing, I believe in nothing. I believe in something. So let's forget all that. That's what I like to do. That's what I like to take my clients to. Let's just go deeper. Can you do what Eckhart Tolle says and be the observer behind your thoughts? And first of all, you have to learn what that means. You have to experience that. You can't hear him talk about it or read his book or hear me talk about it. That's a requirement for my clients, The Power of Now. They have to read that book. Because if they don't, we can't move forward, because it's about becoming more conscious. And that is nothing to do with intellect, nothing to do with knowledge. I don't care how book smart you are. It doesn't mean you're conscious.
Right.
It doesn't mean you're aware. And you said something earlier in the beginning of the program, and then I'm going to shut up because I get flowing here and I get in a roll. But you said something about, oh God, what were you talking about? Shoot. I just lost it. Sorry, guys. It'll come back. But it's so important that, it's awareness. You were talking about awareness. And the thing that popped in is, God, that's the most important thing, because without that, you have nothing.
Right.
You have nothing. If you're going on vacation, you're not aware of where you can go, where are you going?
Right. How are you ever going to get to the destination?
Right. I mean, it's, if you're trying to solve a problem, which there are no problems, obstacles or opportunities, but let's say you're trying to, you're trying to solve a problem, or you're trying to figure out, what do I want to change? If you don't become more aware, you can't. So my suggestion to everyone, if you want to get into finding your line between shadow and light, just start being aware of what are your thoughts? What is the difference between what you're thinking and information outside of your head, or
Right.
maybe deep within you? What is your awareness telling you? Who is aware of what you're thinking? And that is the epitome of the line between shadow and light. Because if you don't have that, you don't know. And you're going to be stuck in that world of, I don't like this. So if I don't like this is what ego says. If I don't like this, I have to get away from it.
Right.
And if I like that, it must be good. I have to go toward that is not good and bad.
Right.
What you like and dislike it has nothing to do with good and bad, does it?
Well, and it's going to change, right? Like, I know, going with the whole coaching thing, you suggest, we'll use, I suggested that remedy for you the other day, and you're like, I don't like it. But it worked, right?
I took it. Oh yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether you like it or not. If it works, then you have to, then
Exactly.
that's the wisdom behind it. And, that's the beingness of being present. It's the difference between knowing and wisdom. Knowing is based on, this happened once, or I read about this, so I have this cognitive example that I can base this thing off of. Well, if you say that's absolute truth, well, then you're never going to prove it wrong. It's like we were talking about gravity and air and, all these different things that are facts. Well, they can also be disproved in certain circumstances. It's not an absolute, but these different things that are facts. Well, truth.
I'm just making sure
I
this is
started
live.
tripping out. I was like hearing myself. I'm like, wait a
I
minute.
know Susie did that to me yesterday. I'm sorry. It's an interesting experience.
What is truth? Well, truth is always in the present moment because it's always evolving from here. And when we get caught up in labels and circumstances and stories and all those various different things, it actually keeps us from actually being present, which is actually walking the line between the shadow and light. The
right.
good, the duality. In Tantra and Buddhism and some different philosophies, there's non-dualist mindsets, and I think this is what we're talking about here in this is that there's a if most of us have been told it's not, but then that means you can't judge good either, because judging one also creates the other, because there is no up without down. There is no victor without a victim, or however you want to, because otherwise the words would have no meaning to the cognitive mind. Right. It brings no direction. So to truly sit in, am I safe? I was just reading about transmuting chaos. And they say, one of the ways to do that is to use poison as your medicine. To take those things that you don't care for, the experiences that you've had that hurt or painful, and learn to transmute that into peace, because it happened. And not only did it happen, you survived it. You've learned some things. And for me as a former addict, and I still have addictions, but a substance, cocaine and alcohol and that kind of stuff, haven't done that for almost a decade. But to get past, I had to admit, like, hey, this isn't working for me anymore. This isn't going to get me to the place that I want to be in my life. So you have to surrender it. You just let it go. And the more we let it go and practice that letting go, the easier it is to allow others to have their own experience without trying to change them. Because this is just my journey. You want to have a drink? Have a drink. In fact, I'll drive you home from the bar, because I'd rather you get home safe than get a phone call later that you had a couple drinks and you got in a car wreck, or you got a DUI, and now you're going to go through those consequences. And I think that's what we're as a society, what we're missing so much more of is compassion for people's experiences, and allowing them to have the experiences that they need to have without that judgment, and saying, you're going to get your lesson when you get your lesson. Like, I don't have to be a guru. I don't have to tell you what to do. I just have to hold safe space for you. So when something like that happens, you feel safe enough to talk to me about it, because you're going to come up with your own answers. Now, if I give you what you're supposed to think, or how you're supposed to feel, or how you're supposed to live, are you truly living your own life? No. You're living through the option of somebody else. the advice of somebody else. And I think that creates shadow
Mm-hmm.
because we don't figure it out for ourselves, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and just because I like, you know, vanilla ice cream and you like chocolate ice cream doesn't mean they shouldn't coexist, you know.
Right.
It's realizing that there's place in this world for everything. There's all variations, and it's not supposed. We're not machines. We're not binary. We're supposed to have we're supposed to have all these various different things happen for us because that allows us to grow in ways that we wouldn't. You know, one of the principles I know I like to talk a lot about is gratitude and growth. And, gratitude for pain and pleasure reveals awareness that allows you to grow in wherever you're trying to experience, whatever you're trying to get to, whatever you're trying to be or to achieve, or any of those things. And it's impossible to do it without it. You grow regardless.
Mm-hmm.
There's a fun story. It was talking about there was a Zen Buddhist, and he was a gardener, and he built this beautiful garden, and it was all ornate and decorative and just beautiful. And a guy said, "Man, look at the beauty of what God created." And he said, "Yeah, you should have seen it before I got there." Because it
That's
was growing,
brilliant.
it was just growing wild. It was through that guy, that gardener's vision and his discipline and his actions that created that ornate garden that got everything to grow in a beautiful way. And it needed that ego, if you will, to be able to make that achievable. It needed that identity of, this is what I could do. This is what value I could add to it. Which I don't think is a bad thing. I mean, in Buddhism, one of the things that they talk about is egolessness. And I think that's just stating that it is what it is. It's not what it's not, and we can make it mean whatever we want it to mean, which is true unconditional love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think all of these things, when we're talking about like tangible aspects and making decisions and things like that, I think that if we were to break it down and really simplify all this for people, you know, we can say, look at it in different dimensions and paradigms. They're two different things, but look at it from, the standpoint of, you know, energy, thought, feeling, and experience. So if, you know, ego, for example, is meant to be a tool for our consciousness. And so, like anything, if you're given you know, a samurai sword and you don't know how to use it, it's just going to be very dangerous. I mean, I trained in samurai swords for years, and my instructors would turn me out in the fields with the swords, and I was supposed to cut blades of grass at a very specific spot. It wasn't easy,
Right.
but I could cut myself in a heartbeat, even if I was holding the handle when I was first learning. So I think that, ego is very much the same way. And we have a tendency, the human brain, religion is like an extension of the human brain, really, because we take the things that we may really know spiritually, that we may really know consciously, But anything that really runs through our human brain and therefore then our mind becomes tainted with ego, which is fine because you wouldn't be human without ego.
Right.
So again, we have something that you can look at it from any side. And my question to people is, why do you even have to look at it as good or bad? Helpful or hurtful? Instead, yeah, I think it's important to learn to recognize you're the observer behind the thought. That allows you to observe the pain body, to observe the ego. That is vital, because then guess what? You can use the ego where it was really in place to be used. The problem is our consciousness has to catch up evolutionarily to our human physical form. So, 20, 30,000 years ago, we needed the ego just to survive. Nowadays, if we haven't evolved consciously, that ego pops in at the coffee shop, it pops in at school, it pops in at work, it pops in with our spouse and our family. And it's constantly doing fight or flight because that's its job, to keep us alive. So if you get a phone call from a friend and it doesn't make you happy, and the next thing you know, you're in emotional fight or flight, you're leaping into the shadows. You're creating more shadows. But remember two things, people. There can't be shadow without light. And you are the light. Your egoic self, the mind, both individually and collectively, casts the shadows. It's not anybody else. It's not anything. It's not demons. It's you. Only you can cast the shadow on your own light. So when you are in this world and you are doing shadow work, or you are dealing with shadow and light, and you're like, oh, I want the light. What Chris was mentioning earlier in the podcast, we're in a Hollywood world of no surrender, don't give in. And we teach our kids this. Yeah, there are things you better have your boundaries in place mentally. You better know how to say no. It doesn't mean you need to be codependent and sacrifice yourself for every John and Lily that walks down the street and needs something. That's not going to make you a good person. But there does need to, for your own self, with your own feelings, because what you resist will persist. The way, not out of it, there is no way out of it. Like we talked about yesterday, Chris, the way through it can't happen without surrender. And so many of my manifesting clients, it was like, why are, over the years, why is it taking so long? Why is this such a struggle? Are you surrendering? And I would have conversation after conversation after conversation, and they would think that they were. But surrendering means really letting go of control. And at first, it's one of the hardest things to do because you have been raised not to do it. But you know what? As soon as you do it, really do it, you're free. And you're empowered. One of the things martial arts teaches you, in that split second where you think you've got to muscle somebody or you can't let them get a punch in or whatever, that's when you want to surrender. It's when I love using martial arts as an example. I think everyone should do Aikido because it's about 15 different martial arts. And it teaches you this. It teaches you to stay in your center. And you want that person to punch at you, so you can use their force to safely guide them to the other side so you don't have to hurt them, so you don't get hurt.
Right.
That's a form of surrender. There's split fractions of a second where you want them to punch at you. And if you resist, well, sure, you can resist, but even if you're doing this, you're still taking their momentum and moving it. And so we do that within ourselves internally. And I remember the first time I did this, I was 16, and I had my first love broke up with me. And I remember that my parents had said, the house is a mess. Nobody can come in this week. And I remember he wanted to come in. He's like, just let me see, if you don't even trust me enough. And I mean, we'd been childhood friends. you don't even trust me enough to show me your room, then you're not even my friend. And he wasn't BSing me. I mean, this is really how he felt. I get it. I wasn't letting him into his life in his 16-year-old perspective. And I remember that he broke up with me, and I'd seen this person at age 12, and I was like, oh, so for me as a young person, this was life changing. And I remember having the first real heartache of my life. And I just remember intuitively just kneeling down on the floor and crying. And this intuitive voice came over me and was just like, I remember thinking, how can I make the pain stop? And the answer that came back was, well, you can't. You have to go through it. I cried and cried and cried, and it didn't go away because I thought, oh, we're soulmates, all this stuff. So for me, it wasn't just a regular breakup. For me, this was a spiritual thing, which is why it sounds so dramatic.
Well, we can still do that as adults too,
Yeah, and it wasn't ashamed to share it. It was a spiritual thing. So it was a deep-rooted pain for me because I thought this was a spiritual lifetime partner and journey. So for me, it did feel like I literally felt like my whole world was taken out from underneath me. We all know that feeling. It was physical, like there was no floor under me.
Right.
And what was so cool was the answer that kept coming back was, make it hurt. If you can't get away from it, go more into the pain. And so I relaxed more into the pain. I just surrendered to the pain to the point where I was inviting it.
Right.
And I said, come on, can it hurt anymore? And that was one of the most liberating and empowering experiences of my young adult life, was discovering that power of surrender at 16 years of age. And ever since then, I never forgot it. But see, if it hadn't been such a painful experience, I probably would have forgotten it. But it was so painful that I've never forgotten it.
Right.
And so I've had to use it when animals and loved ones are passing. It's, I help my clients with that when they have animals or family members that are crossing over. When you guys read, some of you may not be religious, but I understand what they mean when you read quotes where people are saying, just turn it all over to God. I used to be like, ugh, such a religious term. I didn't like that phrase. But that's really what they're saying. It doesn't matter who you're turning it over to. Turn it over to the universe, yourself, nothingness. If you don't believe in anything, it doesn't matter. Just turn the energy over, surrender it, give up the control. And what happens is, all of a sudden, I just remember sitting up and I couldn't cry anymore.
Right.
There was nothing else to cry about. Was I sad and disappointed? Yeah, but it was the shadow. So you see, I guess my point here, guys, I want to kind of summarize so you guys have a process you can go through today. No matter what it is, when you surrender it, you reveal it for what it is. And you're taking away if what you resist persists, you're eliminating the persistence of that shadow or that situation. If you're trying to manifest something new, it's the same thing. You have to first accept and be grateful for where you are, because where you are is always the launching point for the next thing. And you really have to rewire your mindset to understand that. Stop looking at life as black and white, good or bad, right or wrong. It isn't any of those things. Right. That's the egoic illusion of perception. That's the egoic veil. In truth, oh, okay, so something you don't like is happening. That means something you're going to love is on its way. If you see the opportunity and you don't make sure that shadow is persistent.
It's interesting because, like in sales, in sales training, I was always taught you should be more excited for the no's than the yeses, because yes. Yeah, you did your job. You got the result. Awesome. And that feels good for a minute. That's and right. Then you go and got to do it again, right? And those can be so disempowering, that rejection, that all those things that go into it. But when you can get excited for, back in the day, we always talked about the law of numbers, right? And so we knew the numbers. Like, if I talk to so many people per day, I'm going to get these, whatever. So like, if I was selling paintings, which I did door to door, business to business, and I got 10 people that say no to me, that means the next one was probably going to be a sale,
Yeah.
and so it was, and when I was a recruiter, the same thing, at 21 years old or at 20 years old, I'm out there recruiting for a financial company. And a lot of my work was cold calling and cold work, cold approaching people. And I used to walk around with 50 pennies in my left-hand pocket. And my wife at the time thought I was so crazy. And she's like, why do you do that? And I'm like, because then every time I'm talking to somebody, every time I'm done having a conversation, I take the 1 penny and I put it into my right pocket. And then I know when my pocket is empty on the left-hand side,
Brilliant. Yeah.
I talk to all the people that I need to talk to for that day.
Love that. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was those small things that allowed me to fail forward. That was one of the things that when I would be speaking or training, people go, well, what's your secret? And I'm like, I just talk to more people than you. That's it. There's no secret. I personally like to be out and about and meet people, talk to them at the gas station, whatever. Like that was my thing back then. But, and they would talk to me about cold calls. And I'm like, yeah, when I sit down to do cold calls on Mondays and Tuesdays, I make 400 cold calls a day. And they were like, oh my God, how do you do that? And I'm like, I call during the day and I leave messages on machines. I know I have to do more work because I'm not actually having conversations.
Right. Yeah.
But the people who call me back, they're interested.
Right.
So I don't have to go through all those people who aren't interested because I'm calling off a cold call list. They didn't know, they weren't expecting my phone call. So, I mean, it's setting yourself up for success in whatever it is that we're choosing to do. It's allowing for adversity to come in, but being aware of that's part of the magic. That's what makes it mean something. You were talking before about heaven and hell, and I've used this in many conversations. If we were able to manifest and experience everything that we want in life, the immediate time that we wanted it, how long do you think we would go before we got bored?
Absolutely. Bored because we have an ego.
Right. Well, I mean, look at, and again, I'm not trying to cause separation or whatever, but I'm very blessed to know a lot of financially independent people that are able to do what they want, when they want, with who they want, whatever. And they struggle with life because there isn't adversity. They don't have those challenges. It was like, oh man, you just got back from Germany. How was it? Well, it was cold. Didn't really. I didn't really like the weather. It was like, you were just in Germany. I mean, you go and do all these things, and you didn't have a good time because it was cold. Oh, that's interesting. And it almost. And then you see those kids that have not had anything in their life, and they get the chance to go to a baseball game or something, and it just lights them up because it was something that they didn't think was possible for them.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that we as humans sometimes take for granted, how blessed we truly are. And it's easy to complain. It's easy to cast shadow. It's easy to project shadow. Oh, this person's a narcissist because they didn't do what I wanted, and they didn't apologize, or they didn't hold themselves accountable. Whatever it is, that's just you can't get on social media today without hearing about empaths and narcissists. And I think it's really sad because anyone that's given the space to grow and change typically will.
And you know what? Even if they choose not to in this life, to the extent that they can, that's none of your business.
Right.
And people might say, but it is. There, she's the, the mother of my children, or the father of my kids, or my sister. It doesn't matter. Even if they're your child,
Right.
it doesn't matter, because they're their own soul, their own being, with their own free will and their own choice. And, it's true, Chris, the greatest gift you can give anyone is holding space for them. And I think what most people don't know, is like when I deal with conflict resolution with my clients, and we're always working on, being present. That's one of the things that comes up, is if you really truly want to support someone, you may not be able to help them, but the greatest help you can be to someone is to hold space for them. That means you're unconditionally loving them, holding a space for them to make mistakes, screw up, be whoever they're going to be. And you're strong enough and in your center enough that, I think what people don't understand, we live in a world where we really live in a victim mentality world. And the truth is that every time somebody does something hurtful or you don't like or hateful, it doesn't have to affect you. This was one of the messages of the Stoics. This is how the Stoics dealt with shadow. The shadow that we create. Here's a thought for you. The Stoics reduced their own karma and their own shadow with non-reaction.
Mm-hmm.
This is something I've been really focusing on with my clients the past couple of months. And, it's really fascinating if you just, I tell my clients and students, just try it for a day or two. Try something. Don't expect too much of your mind. Don't say, I'm going to do this the rest of my life. But just take a day or a weekend or 3 days or this week and say, I'm going to try this out. Just attempt non-reaction. Just pretend, that, the Stoics lived at different times throughout history, and they came up and applied the same things. In non-reaction, you create less shadow. And so your life becomes more this way, which is not boring. You don't have to deal so much with this. You can act. I mean, it's hard enough to create and manifest and live every day without all the roller coasters. But if roller coasters are your norm, and every time something happens, you believe your own thoughts or somebody else's. Oh God, I got to stop this person from saying that one. Now I got to talk to her because she said that. No, you don't.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest breakthrough right there. Once you realize you don't have to react, you don't even have to respond. And I don't mean that in a passive aggressive way.
Right.
I do that all the time. And if people do something nasty, I can just smile and I'm not doing it to get an effect from them. I'm detaching and observing, because I'm probably not going to control them. I'm not going to change them. I don't want to create my own shadow or karma.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can already see where, that this isn't going anywhere good, they will assume, if you don't argue with them or contest, that you agree with them. And they'll even go, yeah, right, she agrees with me. No, I might not.
Right.
But my point is, guys, one of the ways you can walk that line and not get sucked into shadow and create more shadow is just by learning to be still. Just observe. And really, guys, test it out for yourself.
Right.
Just try it for a weekend. You'll still have a little reverberation, but once it becomes a habit, you'll start to notice that less crappy shit happens to you because you're not creating it. And this is the part of manifesting people don't know to teach. They work so hard, the vision board, all this stuff. I'm going to be good. I'm going to say things right. I'm going to program myself at night. But what about your reaction to other things?
Right.
What about your need for people to say and do things? If you want to help someone heal, just be quiet, listen to them, observe, hold space for them, be present in their presence. And most of you might not know what that means yet. But when you can do that, miracles happen.
Right. And ask good questions, right? Because they already know the answer. They're just looking for validation, from my own personal experience. You know, if someone sits there with me when I've gone through a bunch of stuff this year, and, you know, and it's been probably some of the most challenging. It's been the most challenging that I've ever had to deal with, because, you know, I didn't have a whole lot of support externally.
Right.
And I at first was a little butthurt about that, because I thought I had, you know, people that had my back because I had their back, and, you know, but going back to that just let them and see what happens. You know, I found out that, you know, people will do what they'll do, and by not having moved on faster, which was my case in the previous, all my other redirections and trials and tribulations, it was like, okay, that door's closed, now I gotta go find the next open one.
Right.
Well, I was so busy, you know, going from here to there, that I didn't actually get a chance to actually sit in that discomfort, to sit in the pain of my emotions, to cry, to go through the somatic training, to do breath work, to do all the things that I needed to do to let all that stuff out, so I didn't have to carry it anymore. You know, and you know, observing my thoughts, you know, how I was judging myself. Oh, I could have done this differently. I could have done that. And no, I couldn't have, because I didn't have that awareness then. But now that I do have the awareness of how I could have been different, I don't know how it would have changed the outcome. But now I have the lesson of, okay, I'm not going to fall down that trap again. I'm not going to allow myself to get distracted in this way. I'm not going to allow myself to people please in this way. I'm not going to continue to, I'm a giver. You know, I want to help people. And as long as there's breath in my lungs and my heart's beating, you know, I'm going to do everything I can to help people. But at the same time, I have to make sure that I'm still in a good place. Because if I'm not in a good place, then my advice isn't in a good place. I'm more reactive. You know, and again, I'm going to create more ripples of shadow effect, or negative effect, or lower vibrational effect, however you want to look at it, that I'm going to have to overcome before I get back to center. Mm-hmm. And so being in non-reaction, or limited response, allows us to find that center first and say, you know, okay, based on what I'm aware of, this is the way that I can move in that way. Mm-hmm. You know, this is how I can rebuild or reclaim, however you want to, you know, again, they're labels to get us from where we are. And we need to use the mind. I mean, it's an advantage that we have, that we can create plans, that we can create strategy, that we can communicate. And for me, in relationships, you know, the shadow and the light, walking between those two, it's all about collaboration. Okay, this didn't work. We had an argument. How can we fix it? How can we heal it? How can we come back into harmony with one another? Because we're human beings having this shared experience. And I don't believe that people are disposable. You know, I don't like that. It's just my thing right now. It's where I'm at. But I feel like everybody has value in this world, and we can create distance without rejecting. And, you know, my childhood traumas with my father and my challenges with my father growing up, we would not be where we are today had I just disposed of that and moved away and not talked to him because it was too challenging, it's too difficult. But the more we communicate, the more we bring into the light of awareness, right, the better our relationship is.
And I think that's interesting, as we close up today, I think that's interesting too, because for all of you listening, the cool thing about being in this, having this life experience, is there isn't a right or wrong. Mm-hmm. There's what you choose. Mm-hmm. So whether you had chosen to go off and distance from your family or stay and work through, it matters kind of in a little way in your life. Mm-hmm. But in the big picture of your journey, we always have in front of us exactly what we need to learn. So internally, you would have had the same thing to work on mm-hmm. in a different way. Right. And I think for each of you listening, it's not about trying to not make mistakes like society encourages. It's not about, we're trained to make decisions based on what we think the outcome's going to be. And that's backwards. Part of what you're really describing, Chris, in how you chose to handle your family situation is, you didn't make that decision necessarily that way. Right. When we make the decisions internally, and we, sometimes, we become indecisive. And one of my favorite quotes is, "The path to hell is paved with indecision." We're so afraid of making the wrong choice, and that casts more shadows. Right. When we make a choice, we can move forward. It's better to make a choice, move forward, make a mistake, and be like, "Oh, not that way. We're going to go this way now." Right. Than to stay in a place where you end up feeling stuck and stagnant because you're stopping that energy from moving. Sure. So, I think that, for our listeners wondering, okay, so how do I navigate this line between light and shadow? Well, you could start by simply being aware of the two, understanding they're two sides of the same coin. Then use that awareness and begin practicing non-reaction, right, surrender, gratitude, presence. All of those things reduce the shadow and or enhance your ability to see, because we can love and accept someone, we cannot judge someone, but at the same time, we're not obligated to have them in our space. Right. We're not obligated to have them in our energy. We may be in things together, but we're still alone. Right. Individually, it's still our journey. And I think one last thing I want to throw out here, at least for myself for today, is everything is a reflection of you. So your relationship with a person, your job experience, it's a reflection of what's going on in here. So no matter who and what's coming and going, we can get rid of 10 relationships that were the same way and get rid of those people and say good riddance. But until we look inward and we make those inner shifts and we make choices that are outside of our comfort zone, which are unknown, which are scary as hell, then we're not going to see a shift in our manifested reality. Right.
Well, and what is it that we're ultimately seeking? For most of us, it's peace.
Yes. Yes.
And if we can't find acceptance in the duality, we'll never find our own peace. And yep. That's why I challenged myself to continue the conversations and the relationship with my dad, because he can sit there and tell me his opinion of me, and I'll just go, okay, yeah. That's your opinion of me. Yeah. That's not how I view myself. And I know there's a lot of other people that don't view me that way. And that's just fine.
But it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Because opinions are of the mind.
Right. Well, and it goes back to the Dalai Lama, and I always love this about harmony, and I'll end here. He says, when you're being praised, remember those who criticize you. When someone criticizes you, remember someone who praises you. And then you'll know balance. You'll know harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so easy when we're getting praised, like, oh yeah, look, I'm on the right track. I'm on the right track. I'm on the right track. I'm doing the right thing. Da, 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 da. And then someone criticizes it and you're like flat on your back, like, wow, I wasn't ready for that.
Right?
Like,
and the funny part is none of it matters.
No.
It's
No, you
your
gotta get back
reaction
up and you
to
gotta
it.
keep going.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise your life ends.
It's only your reaction to it that matters. And
Right.
and I think once we reduce this, we're programmed as clan animals. We are animals, guys. Sorry, you're either a plant or an animal. We are clan animals, and it's a survival thing. So we are programmed to fear rejection, because that meant we were tossed out on our own, where the cannibal tribes could eat us or the tigers could get us. And we don't like to think of ourselves that way. We think we're so high society and evolved. But the truth of the matter is, a big storm could blow through and hello, you're all back in nature. So
Right.
ultimately, our little fake subdivisions and societies are nothing more than illusions that we've physically created in nature. Mm-hmm. You are a part of nature. So you aren't as far from that as you think.
Right.
And so when somebody rejects us, and I will keep reminding you guys of this, that 95% of your mind you are unaware of. You're creating your life with the 95% of your mind you are unconscious of, people. This is so eye-opening when you get this. When you wonder, oh my God, why does this keep happening to me? Why aren't things changing? This is why. But as clan animals, when the girl across the coffee shop gives us a dirty look, and then somebody says, yeah, she didn't like how your hair was today, and we have to go get our hair done, and oh my God, and I must not be up with the times, and I'm getting old, and all that crap. Who cares? So we care so much about that because our subconscious mind, it gets our adrenaline going. It tells our subconscious mind, uh-oh, you're being judged in the tribe. You might be tossed out. All fear is the fear of death if you go down the rabbit hole.
Right.
So when you find yourself being that impacted by someone's opinion, just know it's your subconscious mind, your egoic self, trying to keep you alive. And, somebody's opinion about your hair isn't the end of the world, but your 2-year-old egoic mind doesn't know that. So, that's something that's very helpful if you can retrain that.
Right.
But anyway, wow, Chris, this has been an amazing conversation. And if those of you that listen on the rebroadcast or you joined us live, don't forget to subscribe to our page, guys, and like the broadcast so more people can find it. We've only done this twice. We haven't marketed it very much. So I think it's going to be pretty cool once it gets up and going.
Yeah.
For sure. Any last words of wisdom, Chris, for today?
Enjoy
Yes.
the experience of today. INJOY, right? Enjoy. And that doesn't mean you have to be. It just means you enjoy it for what it is, the experience, and it doesn't need to be any more or any less than it already is. And that's how we create our heaven on this planet. If we're trying to make what is something different, then we'll always be creating hell within our own existence. So
yeah, as Eckhart Tolle says, accept what is and be grateful for what is in the moment. That's actually your most likely way of creating more experiences for yourself that are the ways you want to feel. You got to accept and be grateful for where you are now, because now is all that is. And now is the most powerful place to manifest. When you do that, then and only then are you able to really manifest what brings you the greatest joy, peace, and fulfillment. So that's great advice, Chris.
Wonderful.
Very good.
Well, thank you, Larkin.
Sure.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. Woo.
And we'll see you all next, I wanted to say Thursday, next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. And, let us know your thoughts in the comments or questions that you would like us to talk about. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, or ideas of what you'd like us to talk about.
Absolutely.
That would be good too.
Yeah. We'll talk about anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Enjoy.
Have a good night, guys.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.